Okay, here is a problem that Muslims need to answer. This book, the Qur'an. Here it is. This is the Hafs. This is the Hafs. This is the one that has been chosen for the whole world. I've been talking about it. You've seen the videos on it. What the Islamic traditions tell us, and what every Muslims have told us, this is what I've heard almost going on almost 50 years now, is that this book is the greatest book in the history of mankind. This book is eternal. It has never been created. That this book has, well, it's inimitable. It has no criticism that can be leveled at it. It was set down over a 22-year period from 610 to 632. That's what we're told. That's what we're told. That's what the traditions from the 9th and 10th century tell us. And that when it was finally compiled in a written form, we're not going to talk about orality. That's for another video. That's for another time. But when it was finally written down by Abu Bakr, well, actually it was Zayd ibn Thabit under the authority of Abu Bakr, that was the first time it had been written down. And the reason why is because of the problem with orality, because those who had memorized it had died at the Battle of Yamama. So this book, greatest book in the history of mankind, the final revelation to supersede all the other former revelations. And so this book, they tell us, was then compiled into one dialect by Uthman in 652, and everything else that disagreed with it was eradicated by being burnt. That's in Al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari from the traditions tells us this. Volume 6, book number 61, hadith number 510. And then they tell us that the reason Uthman burned all the others is because they disagreed. So now we have one book that is unique, sent to 5 cities. You have Medina and Mecca, there in Saudi Arabia. You have Basra, you have Kufa, you have Damascus further up north in Syria. So those are the 5 cities. Now, there are others that say there were more. I remember Hatun many years ago, she used to say that there were 9. Because in Al-Bukhari it says every province. And if we look back at the provinces, there was Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo. You also have Aden, you have Nishapur and Herat. So all of these would have been provinces, so possibly 9. Let's go with 5. Let's just go with 5, since that's the one that everybody seems to want to use today. So sent to 5 cities so that no other Quran would impinge on it, so that it would not be corrupted, so it would not be deleted, decreed, and all the rest. And also so that these 5 cities, where these 5 Qurans were now housed, would be the model for all other Qurans. So I'm assuming, therefore, that other Qurans were then created out of these 5. These 5 were the model. Yes, these are the paradigm. And from these 5, I'm assuming probably maybe thousands of other Qurans were created. You don't just keep them in one city, one Quran, because what are the people going to memorize? So they had to memorize them. We know they were memorized almost from the very beginning. You have to have your own private Qurans, and you need to have also Qurans for every household. You need to have Qurans for the schools. You had to have something that they could look at, that they could read, so they could memorize. So let's assume that for every one of these 5 cities, maybe a few hundred for each one, possibly 1,000, but we're not just talking about these 5 cities, because they controlled all the way from Tripoli all the way to Afghanistan, that whole swath of land. And when you look from Afghanistan coming to Iran, what is today Syria and Jordan and Iraq, and you have also Egypt coming on over, all the way over to Libya, all that land had lots of cities, lots of Muslims, tens of thousands, maybe millions of Muslims, and they all needed Qurans. At least their families needed Qurans. So let's assume that maybe 1,000, a lot more than 1,000 were created from those 5. Can I make that jump? Is that an assumption that it's okay? So here you have the greatest of all revelations, created by, given to Muhammad, created by first Abu Bakr, then Uthman, sent to 5 cities by the end of the 7th century. By the 8th century, we then should have thousands of Qurans. By the time, let's even put it back, I would say even by the end of the 7th century, we should have thousands of Qurans. So where are they? I've been asking this for 25 years. The one from Uthman we can't find anywhere. The 5 from Uthman that were sent to the 5 cities we can't find anywhere. What about the hundreds and hundreds that came out from those 5? Where are they? Where are they? Why can't we find them? Muslims, what have you done with them? Well, some of you have brought this up, and I just printed off some of your comments on this very problem. Let me just go to Bigirban. Bigirban says this. According to the Islamic lore, now he's talking about the traditions. Again, the traditions. This is Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, all those, all the way up to Tabari. The caliphs were devout Muslims, and the Quran was the constitution of the caliphate. Thus, the Quran must have been distributed to every region and town of the empire, since it formed the legal basis of the government. It was the foundation for everything. All the laws come from it. All the institutions come from the Quran. Everything that we know that Muhammad did and said was based on what the Quran did and what the Quran was written. And so therefore, it would be the basis for all of government. I would say the basis for all of life. Thus, we must expect that thousands of Qurans were made in the 7th century. Okay, are you getting it? Furthermore, the Quran was a whole book that was guarded and venerated like no other book. And even the Quran makes that claim. We've talked about it already before. In chapter 15, verse 9, that Allah will guard it. In chapter 10, verse 15, in chapter 18, verse 27, that nobody can change it. Not one word, not one letter can be changed. So it is unchangeable, and it is well guarded, he is saying here. Venerated like no other book. And even today, it's still venerated like no other book. How come we have lots of books from the 7th century, and I would say even before, that were less popular and less protected than the Quran, but not one Quran? We find those books, and you can find all kinds of books from the 7th century, and even earlier, 6, and also continuing 6th, 5th, 4th, all the way down. We can find all kinds of doctrine. Listen, we have over 230 manuscripts of the New Testament from before the 6th century, either complete or partial. We have 3 complete, what we know as metropolitan codices. We've talked about them many times. We know them as the Vaticanus and the Sinaiticus and the Alexandrinus. These are from the 4th century. That's 200 to 300 years before the 7th century, 200 to 300 years before this book was ever distributed all over the empire. So he's asking a very valid question. Mentis Potens goes on, and he says this. Is there any local independent source about the places and the presence of the Quran sent to the main towns of the Arab Empire? Or are the only records we have those from the Hadith written 2 centuries later? Because this is Al-Bukhari. He died in 870, so this is the late 9th century that we're getting this report that they were sent to these 5 cities, and of course every province, so that may be as many as 10. He goes on and says, Mentis Potent says this, I think there should be records, not only from the place and person who sent the copies, Medina and Uthman, if I well understand, but also from the towns and authorities that received the copies and had the injunction imposed on them to standardize all the existing Qurans so that they agreed with the authorized version compiled by Uthman. That's a valid point he's making. And it's a point that I've been trying to make, and I see Muslims are not taking it on board. They just say, it was there. The Quran existed. Scott Thong continues. Not only are the Quranic manuscripts late, but they also don't match the modern Cairo edition. It's almost as if they didn't have a perfect and complete master copy for Uthman to follow. And I think that's it. And he's putting underline. It looks like all of this is nothing more than hearsay. Attributions. We get these attributions from the 9th and 10th century of this Quran that supposedly existed at the time of Uthman, sent to 5 cities. It's attributed to that. I've talked about it. You cannot talk. Please don't waste my time with an archetype or what do they call, copy or a Q document. I'm not wasting my time anymore with those kind of excuses. And here, they're taking one step further. They're going even further than this to say we should have not just 1, we should have not just 5, we should have not just 9, we should have thousands of Qurans. If this is the book that is at the center of the universe, if this is the book that is the foundation for everything Islam believes, for Muslim are to believe, this is the book that was revealed to Muhammad, that came from heaven, that has always existed, had over 22 years, if this is the book that was finally compiled in its first form in 6th 632, then recompiled again, rewritten again in 652. Where is it? Because by that time, once you have that Quran, then you have multiple Qurans that were made for multiple places, multiple cities, multiple families, multiple communities. All those Qurans should be in existence. We're just talking about one or two. We're not talking about five. We're talking about thousands of Qurans, and we can't even find any from the 7th century. Not one. These are all from the 8th century. Don't even look at these. These are printed in the 21st century, and I'm not even sure that these from the 8th century that we can find any originals. We haven't even gone into that question yet. So, what's going on here, Muslims? Either the fact that you can't find any of these Qurans from the 7th century at all, the fact that the only places in the 7th century we can even see Quranic script is on the Dome of the Rock, on certain rock inscriptions, is on the coins introduced in 692, the last 10 years of the 7th century, by Abd al-Malik, and on the Caliphal Protocols. That's it! That's it! Oh, you come up with all little fragments here and a fragment there, but you've not done any work on them. There's no forensic testing to know whether those fragments are from the 7th century. Most of them are on parchment, but we know even the manuscripts, like the top copy that you see that brown one up, that's the top copy up there. That's from the mid-8th century. Do not put it in the 7th century. You know, you go on and on about the Birmingham folios. We're going to destroy the Birmingham folio to realize, when you realize the Birmingham folios are not even from the 7th century. They are probably They are probably from the 6th century. And they are pre-Islamic. They're pre-Quranic because the material in them has nothing to do with Islam. It had to do with stories that are actually Christian and Jewish stories that came before the Quran. So, where are all these Qurans? I've been asking just for one, or even 5, or even 9. Even one would do. Even one would do. If this is such a great book, if it meant so much to the Muslim community, if this was the foundation of everything they believe, and they haven't even been able to retain one, what does that tell you? I know what it tells me. It tells me that everything that these 9th and 10th century traditions say about that book and how it was put together is probably fraudulent. Probably never happened. I doubt if there was ever a Quran that is eternal, that was sent down to Muhammad, that was compiled by Abu Bakr, and then Uthman, and then sent to 5 cities. I doubt all of that exists. I think all of that is fraudulent. Well, you got to decide yourself. You decide. Do you trust those traditions? Because everything you're going to hear about that Quran is from those traditions. Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Al-Tabari. That's all they tell you about. And everything so far that I have heard from Muslims is quoting those traditions. But they cannot show me, they cannot prove that that book ever existed. So if you can't show it, then would you either shut up or accept that everything that you are dependent on, everything that you base your beliefs on, is based on a fraud that never existed. You decide. God bless you. This is Jay. Over and out.